I'm your cult boyfriend, and I'm a huge fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Something I've noticed from interacting with all these different fandoms is when people talk about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, they talk about Buffy differently. You can see it. You can see it in their eyes. You can see it in their physicality, or if you're not speaking face to face, you can kind of like feel it in their tone and their response. People talk about Buffy on an extremely personal level. Buffy means something hyper personal to people who love it. It's not just a show. It's something that helped them, something that aided them, something that formed, shaped, and saved them. Like Buffy saved a lot of people. And when people talk about the show, you can feel it. You can feel they're talking about it differently. They're talking about it in a way you don't normally hear people talk about television. And I, for one, am no different. I think season two of Buffy the Vampire Slayer is masterful. I think that it's extraordinarily structured. I think that it's designed beautifully. I think it's beautiful. I think that in season one, Joss Whedon and the writers and the network, they provided us with basic outlines of standard archetypes in conventional lines. And in season two, that's where Joss started to get experimental. That's where the writers began to philosophically grapple with the characters that we've grown to love. Season two is where Joss starts to punish not only Buffy, but the audience. Season two is where we start to see Buffy the Vampire Slayer for the nihilistic masterpiece that it is. So I'm going to talk like broad strokes. I'm not going to go, I don't think I'm going to do like specifics, right? That'd be impossible. There are thousands of thousands, that might be an exaggeration, but also it might not be. There are a lot of podcasts and YouTube channels and blogs that have covered every single episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer in depth, and they always have something interesting to say about it. Either it's from like a queer analysis or a feminist lens or a racial one, a political one, or simply a gossipy one. There are a lot of different outlets you can go to if you want to get into the specifics of each episode of Buffy. I'm more interested in the broad strokes. I'm more interested in the full effect of Joss Whedon's second season of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Buffy the Vampire Slayer season 2, we get a lot of new introductions. Some massive new players enter into the frame. Spike, Drusilla, Oz, and Kendra, I think being the most the most iconic, quite unlike the Master, who was it was a big bad on factory settings, you know? He was just a standard big bad tough guy villain who I really wasn't thrilled by, but I think he was deliberately designed to be kind of boring. Spike and Drusilla, you couldn't get more fascinating than Spike and Drusilla. You couldn't get more entertaining. I love their dynamic. Of course, Spike is this extremely clever, extremely sadistic and playful and cruel, you know. He's this wonderful vampire with platinum blonde hair and a Billy Idol accent and this kind of like punk rock atmosphere to him. Whereas Drusilla, she is God, guys, I love Drusilla. She is my mother. I love Drusilla. She's like so fucking cool to me. She is like like if Tim Burton was a complete psychopath, he still couldn't have created Drusilla. But she does have like a Tim Burton kind of style to her, like stylistically. You just walk into a room. What are you doing, Drew? I'm naming the stars. We're inside, Drew, and it's daylight. She is a fascinating character. Of course, Drew was a victim of Angel's. Drew was driven insane by Angel. Angel killed everyone close to her, her family, her friends, everybody. Drove her insane and then changed her into a demonic vampire, and she has kind of remained in that psychotic stasis for hundreds of years. And she also has these powers of hypnosis, of suggestion. Maybe she is a seer and sees things, like has visions, but Spike always points out the flaws. Like, no, I don't think she saw it, Angel. I think she read the paper. Things like that. But Drusilla is just so fucking cool. And it kind of speaks to the psychosexual nature of Joss Whedon's vampires. Because vampires are interesting things, right? Vampires are very interesting things. Spike and Drusilla have such a massive impact on the show stylistically, and I think start to rev up the nihilistic engines. They start to show just how nihilistic Joss Whedon's vampires are, and just how scared of nihilism I think Joss Whedon truly is. Buffy the Vampire Slayer is an existentialist show. It's about identity. It's about soul. It's about the definitions of the human character, and by proxy of that, it's an examination of the human condition, which is both a celebration and persecution of it. And I think what scares Joss Whedon most is the idea that there is absolutely no meaning apart from our passions. Passion gives us meaning, but it doesn't give us purpose. Passion, passion, passion. The most important episode of this season is called Passion, but let me try to finish my original thought here about vampires. Vampires have always like kind of symbolized something that was scary to culture at the time. To I've gone through this in other videos to be as quick as possible. Vampires in cinematic form, Nosferatu seemed to have been an anti-Semitic caricature, which kind of shadowed or mirrored um, German frustrations and global anti-Semitism at the time. And, Bela Lugosi is kind of Fear, the vaguely Eastern European foreigner who has a large sex drive and our women find irresistible. You get to like The Lost Boys and Fright Night and Interview with the Vampire, like the Anne Rice school of thought, and the Anne Rice and Joel Schumacher school of vampirism is like a sexually ambiguous character. There's something wrong with our blood, aka the AIDS epidemic was huge and it was transferable. And the vampires belong to a different kind of rebellious, unconventional, very sexual lifestyle. And the vampire was basically gay at that point. I think when Joss Whedon came around in the late 90s, the 90s was a very postmodern age. And I think that the first basic tenet of postmodernism is that God's been dead. God is so dead that God is a non issue, all right? Like, we've known this for a very long time. So I think that what actually scares people the most is that what if this thing that we all hold to believe is true is actually true? Like, what are the ramifications of that? Like, what is the consequence of nihilism? Like, what is the end goal of nihilism? The end goal of nihilism is destruction through passion. And I think that Joss Whedon fears that so much, which is why he kind of made that the thesis of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I think that's why he tortures his characters so much, specifically Buffy, because I think that Buffy is this kind of, if not a sexual fantasy of Joss's, it's an escapist sort of fantasy of Joss's. It's this thing that he holds on to in the face of nihilism, of a girl who is just so strong that um, not even meaninglessness incarnate can stop her. Like she can bounce back from anything, even nihilism. In fact, like her very existence is a threat to nihilism because she is so self-determined, self-motivated, and heroic, truthfully. So I think that like Joss is kind of testing that fantasy within his head because he's scared to death that it isn't true. And that's why all these vampires are so deeply nihilistic. Uh, all these vampires seem to want to bring on the apocalypse, the end of the world, complete and total destruction. And we start to really examine this through the dynamic of Spike and Drusilla. Um, they are complete like nihilists, and I think that that terrifies Joss and it excites the audience. And I know that Joss got very upset about how much the network and the audience responded to Spike in particular. They loved Spike. And Joss's original plans were to kill Spike. Because, Joss thinks that vampires are bad. He thinks nihilism is actually quite scary. I think he's an existentialist at heart. And the differences between existentialism and nihilism may seem arbitrary, but they absolutely aren't. Joss is the kind of guy I've seen interviews and heard commentary tracks where I think he's entirely motivated by Jean-Paul Sartre. I've heard him talk about nausea like at length, ad nauseum, ad infinitum. He's obsessed with nausea. And he's obsessed with a particular part of the book, Nausea, where the main character, the stand in for Jean Paul Sartre, the famous existentialist philosopher himself, is on a bus and he looks at the benches. And then he imagines all of these different components of that bench, the things that make up the bench, like removed and isolated from each other without any actual definition. Then he sees the world as a world without definition, which I think comes to a head in The Body in season 5, where Joss completely explores those ideas and those concepts. Here he is battling nihilism. He's battling the nihilism that creeps in on his fantasy, which is Buffy Summers. But James Marsters, the actor who played Spike, has told this story before that like Joss got kind of physical with him and he was like, I hate you. I hate you, and if it was up to me, you'd be dead, so just shut up and do your job. I hate you. And I don't think he ever stopped hating him. I think that like when people talked about The Body, for instance, being such a beautiful episode, James Marsters even said that was a great episode. And Joss was like, yeah, and you weren't in it. Go figure. Because Joss doesn't see these vampires with redeeming qualities. Like, there's a reason why when Angel loses his soul, it is total, it is complete, and he is the most evil son of a bitch you've ever seen. That's the thing, right? Because Spike and Drusilla come in as the original big bads, but by the middle of the season, Angelus, Angel without a soul, becomes the big bad. And this is where it gets truly metaphorically powerful. And I think why so many people respond quite emotionally to this season. Me too. Have you ever dated someone and right when you gave them like the most private part of you, right where you were at your most vulnerable, they became sociopaths overnight and kind of tried to destroy your life. People out there are just malicious and antagonistic. Um, cool thing about Buffy is that, like, metaphorically it's beautiful, but also the lore is wicked fucking cool. So like it can work on several different levels. Let's look at the metaphorical one right now. Buffy Summers is this teenage girl who gives her virginity to this older guy who, after getting that virginity, makes it his raison d'etre, his purpose, his reason for being. Uh, he decides to torture her, to ridicule her, to humiliate her, to stalk her, to turn her life into a living hell, and be super fucking docious about it, taunting her about her sexual inexperience, about her romantic inadequacies, hurting her every chance that he gets. Angel torments her, traumatizes her by how awful and cruel he is to her. And that scenario I played out for you, like I can relate to it, but I think that sadly, the most potent thing um, about this uh, about this dynamic here, this tragic one that I'm talking about, I think that so many women have this experience. Like so many women can relate to this scenario, and that's fucking tragic. It's also what makes Angel such an enormously provocative and powerful villain. And David Boreanaz, when he turns, he is so good. But it also goes back to what I was saying. Like Joss likes to provide us with proof that he understands conventions, that he understands like standard plays, like how things are ordinarily expected to play out. And this turn wouldn't have worked if we didn't buy their chemistry, their romance in the first place. So David Boreanaz and Sarah Michelle Gellar, I really felt something that was quite palpable between them. And when the turn came, it was heartbreaking on several different levels in several different ways for a variety of factors. I think that the most hurtful one is that this guy who seems so tortured and so remorseful could just flip a switch and target this girl who gave him every single part of her and not rest. not rest until he's totally demolished her in every single way. Thanks a lot, Joss. You fucking bastard. That's also what makes the show so powerful, right? Angel becomes nihilism incarnate. I can't speak. Have you noticed? Angel becomes nihilism embodied, the personification of nihilism, and it's how Joss Whedon views nihilism as this passionate, ultra impassioned like vehicle, like speeding towards mass destruction, mass annihilation, and a very emotional kind of holocaust. I mean, I think he sees nihilism as fueled by passion. Uh, which brings us closer to the episode Passion, but I'm not quite there yet because it also shows us the difference between Spike and Drusilla. Because when Angel becomes the big bad, becomes the overall villain, nemesis of the second season, he kind of cucks Spike in a pretty huge way. Spike is like wheelchair bound, and when he shows up on the scene, he constantly taunts and makes fun of him for being in that wheelchair, and obviously has stolen the affections of Drusilla from Spike. Which shows that like Drusilla isn't only impressionable, but I think she's a lot more psychotic and vicious than Spike ever was. And Spike doesn't actually want the end of the world. Like that there is a line to nihilism. And how you cross that line is through a psychotic, psychopathic passion. And Spike wasn't willing to do that, and Spike ends up allying himself, however you say it. Spike ends up teaming up with Buffy in the final episode of the season to take down Angel. Angel becoming like the hyper personification of nihilism in its bleak and horrific totality, kind of exposes how precarious honor among nihilists can be. Yes, Angel turns into a complete bastard. Complete bastard. And then something interesting happens. I mentioned that Oz shows up as well. Oz is a wonderful character. He's a man of few words, but they're mostly very clever and very pointed. I think he's a great match for Willow. He's Willow's love interest. And Seth Green is a national treasure. We love Seth Green around here. I think that the most interesting thing about him concerning the way that he is used on the show is tied directly to the meta narrative. So maybe how about I loop back around to that point and talk about something huge. Episode 17, Passion. Here we are. This is the moment that the show changed. The first time I ever saw this episode, I gasped, and every other time I watch it, I can barely keep my eyes on the screen because it is so terrifying. One of my favorite characters, Jenny Calendar, is murdered, and it's unbelievably upsetting. She is chased down by Angel. Angel takes an obvious satisfaction or glee in killing her, and he doesn't even feed on her because he hates her that much. He snaps her neck. And that neck snap, that was the snap heard round the world. That snap rattled the foundational structural core of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And I feel that everything changed after that. Joss said he killed her off to kind of show that we're playing for keeps on this show. No one is safe. And death is final. Which is death is not final on this show, but whatever. It's final with Jenny Calendar. I loved Jenny Calendar. I thought she was such a babe, and I loved her style. I loved the way that she was like working within the show. And this time watching it, did not like the feelings I felt. I'm getting too old, guys. I watched season two and I'm like, man, this Giles is actually a really compelling character. And I'm like, no, Zach, you're an old man now. And now you find Giles to be so fascinating and you are like lamenting and being all sad about his relationship with Jenny. Oh, God, it got me over time. Because now I'm like, oh, I get that relationship. Oh, I get you, Giles. You're a watcher. You watch all these teens with their dramas and you hope for the best. And I'm like, that's literally what you do, your cult boyfriend. You watch teen drama and then you pontificate. That's exactly what you do. I just don't have a Jenny calendar. I'm on the lookout for one though. She was amazing. I love the techno paganism. I love her like blood vendetta against Angel. I like the fact that she was of Romani descent. Her people are the reason why Angel was cursed in the first place. But her death is so stylistically huge. There's not a single laugh within it. Like, I've never seen a show quite like Buffy, or even a film like Buffy, that could shapeshift in and out of stylistic flourishes. It could go from camp to deathly serious without actually betraying either the camp or the seriousness. It could just effortlessly do that. And this is the most perfect example of the whole show. And it might be the most actually upsetting um, character death of the whole show. The visceral impact of Jenny Calendar's neck being snapped right in front of us and we can't stop it and we didn't even expect it to actually happen. Normally people get saved in the nick of time. Not now. Not now. Not this time. Not for Jenny. Oh, and it's such a harsh death. It's such a harsh character death, but that marks not only a stylistic departure, but a change in philosophy. Joss Whedon wants you to be terrified of nihilism because of its ultra-violent outcomes. Like, in order to believe in pure nihilism, you have to reach an ultra-violent goal within your head and commit a holocaust of your own soul. And yes, I think that Joss thinks this heavily about nihilism and about existentialism, and uses postmodern techniques to express it. And the character death of Jenny Calendar is beyond brilliant, it's beyond genius, it is one of a kind, and it's just simply beyond words. Because it is terrifying, it's horrific, it's intimate, and it's close. Closer than I'd like it to be. It hits way closer than I want it to. Oh, and it has not dulled. The impact has not dulled over the years. It is incredible. And like I said, I'm gonna loop it back around to Oz. He's a werewolf, right? And we find out he's a werewolf in an episode that actually comes like right in between where Angel and Buffy sleep together and Angel turns evil, like, and Jenny Calendar's death. So there's Angelus, there's Angel and Buffy sleeping together, and there's Jenny Calendar's death, and in the middle, right here, is the werewolf episode, which is pretty playful, which is pretty nice, a lovely like metaphor for maturity, for like hormonal temper tantrums, of course, because it's a werewolf metaphor. But concerning the meta narrative, I think it's very curious and interesting and powerful structurally very powerful that the episode about a werewolf, the episode about transformative qualities, the episode about transformation happens directly when the show is going through the same kind of transformation. It's becoming darker, it's becoming more intense, it's becoming edgier, it's becoming more openly nihilistic. And that transformative episode, the episode about the werewolf, the episode about transformation, happens right before the show completes its own. You know, the transformation started when Buffy and Angel slept together, and it completed when Angel snapped Jenny Calendar's neck. And I think both are equally intimate and both led to equally psychotic outcomes. And right in the middle is this metaphorical story about transformative powers. This isn't accidental. This has to be deliberate, and I think that's beautiful and does wonders for the meta narrative. It gets you prepared for it. Another character it introduced was Kendra. Bianca Lawson is wonderful. I loved her on Dawson's Creek, and I love her on this season of Buffy. Wish they did more with her character, but I do love that her character, I guess, did die because it is also cruel. It doesn't have the same kind of impact as Jenny Calendar death because it doesn't mean as much stylistically. But seeing Drusilla hypnotize her and then cut her throat with her long nails, oh my God, brutal, brutal. And I also like that she dies because my favorite character in the world is now in play. Faith has been activated. We'll talk about her in the next video. But Bianca Lawson, yeah, with Dawson's Creek and Buffy, the WB definitely seemed to not do enough with her. You know, like I didn't want Kendra to survive this season at all because Faith is, I think, the most interesting character, one of the most interesting characters in teen drama. And I like that she's in play now. And I also feel like she is representative of that Joss trope of I'm going to show you a basic outline and then I'm going to fuck with it in the next season. Like she's our introduction to the idea that there is a second Slayer, and then he's going to use faith to deconstruct it and make it all Nietzschean and nihilistic and fucking terrifying and hypersexualized in the third season. And gay. I can't wait to talk about Buffy's love interest in season three, which is Faith, honestly. But getting ahead of myself. Buffy season two is where the show comes into such a great focus, such a great and clear idea of itself. Like philosophically, it is beyond penetrating. Like this show fucked me up. We also see that Joss is playing with dream sequences. The show as a whole is playing with dream sequences that would make The Sopranos fucking blush with embarrassment. Um, no one does dreams better than Buffy. I'm being fucking for real. Charisma Carpenter continues to be hilarious, continues to be super cute. Xander takes on darker edges. And Cordelia actually gets to have a lot more to do, like personally. Like there are complexities to her character when she starts to at least like visibly acknowledge the artifice that goes into the social hierarchies of high school. Like that's cool. That's always wonderful to see. Willow is just such a delight and such a lovely character all the time. I always love Willow. Willow Rosenberg is one of the best characters on Buffy. Um, and I think we'll really analyze her character around season six. But this is a season of television that needs to be taught in school because it's about how you elevate something effortlessly without the audience even really fully being aware that it's being elevated until it's drastically too late, until that neck is snapped and you went, oh my God, it's been transforming this entire time into something that is truly horrific. Because, I mean, to Joss Whedon, to Buffy Summers, nihilism is the enemy. That's what these vampires represent. They represent nihilism. They represent annihilation of meaning and they represent the end of the world, which is nihilistic, which is born of passion. This season is obsessed with passion. Passion is its main theme, and passion in this season ordinarily leads to the most gothic and morbid places possible. Because maybe Joss is saying that passion is an object of nihilism, or when nihilism exists, and it always does exist, passion is very weak to it. Nihilism can objectify passion effortlessly. That the passion that means so much to you, all it takes is one drop of nihilism, and that passion is objectified and it is weaponized. I think that Buffy the Vampire Slayer season two is saying an awful lot of extremely complicated things about philosophy, about the meta narrative of television, of drama, and of course of comic books as well. We have to remember there's like a comic book mentality to a lot of this because Joss was a huge fan of comic books. Buffy is totally like a superhero in a large way. She fits all the standard tropes, but more than anything else, Joss was a philosopher, and he was an existentialist. He was an artist, and this was his prime. Season two and three of Buffy, I think, was his. That marks his prime, and it's so impressive what he was able to do here. It also speaks to like I like the forced collaboration. You know, everyone talks about like they're all so auteur obsessed. Well, if Joss had his fucking way, then we would only have Spike for like 5 episodes. I am so happy the network was like, no, you little shit, you're not killing Spike. And then Joss had to figure out how not to kill Spike and how to keep him coming back. If you notice, I think his passive aggressive ass brought him back in only one episode of season three until he figured out in season four, oh, I can humiliate Spike by like making them put a chip in his brain that doesn't allow him to bite anybody. Like it's Joss had his revenge in his own way, but James Marsters was just so likable that it never really worked. The humiliation of Spike never exactly worked out the way Joss, I think, envisioned it. But that's why I think that like Forced collaboration, like forced network decisions that prompt you to think immediately without hesitation. I think they're really good. I think it's helpful. I think that that kind of forced collaboration is definitely helpful within art. I am not this auteur obsessed fucking guy. I think that if you actually like of course, we see Joss Whedon's broad strokes here, like his philosophy, and you would see the same thing with like Kevin Williamson's Dawson's Creek or Amy Sherman Palladino's like Gilmore Girls and Schwartz and Savage on Gossip Girl. You see like the main strokes of the auteurs, but just like a film, like everyone has their own unique voice within the piece. And often auteurs bring back the same team or a lot of members who made up that original team, and then it becomes this kind of like unified voice. But great television reminds you that collaboration is often good, and there are plenty of examples where this works out terribly, where a showrunner or a writer's room had a really poignant tale to tell, and the network vetoed the idea, made them tell something superficial. That happens a lot too. But then you get scenarios like on Buffy season 2, where Joss was told, no, you can't kill Spike, the surprise hit character of your show. You cannot kill him because you're because you're having a fucking hissy fit. You cannot kill Spike. Joss, it was your fault he was so popular in the first place. You write nihilism so well, and then you punish your audience for responding so happily to your incredibly lovable nihilistic villains. That's your fault. Genius, still. Genius writer. But I think that I've said all I can say right now about the second season. I love that Buffy finds the strength within herself and reminds you this is an existentialist show. It's not a nihilistic show. You have the power in yourself to be all that you need. When Angel's standing over her with a sword, saying, no weapons, no friends, no hope. What have you got left? And she catches the sword and says, me, and then kicks his ass. No hope. So like we accept hopelessness as the norm, as the human condition is hopelessness. But that doesn't mean you get to be nihilistic and cruel. No. It means you define your own outcomes and you redefine heroism. That's what Buffy Summers did this season. Passion inside of her was tortured and killed by the man she loved, so she murdered that man, and then she fled the narrative. That's how season 2 ends. But she saved the world, whatever that means. Whatever that means. And that's the point. What does that mean? Because the world is a comic book, the world is a cartoon. You live on a hellmouth. It's relentless, Sisyphean, unending. Thank you for watching my video. I'm your cult boyfriend.